Forbes. Do good. There it is. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our March Fireside chat. We're gonna have a lot of fun here talking about roleplay in just a little bit, but we did want to go over some really cool announcements and fun things that have been announced today. Starting with, we have a new Oregon-based chapter. Refuge LARP Oregon City was officially kind of voted into being by the board at the board of directors meeting last week. We've got Ryan and Bailiff and Brian Hudson all coming on board to have this chapter based in Oregon again. Just some pieces of information regarding that. We made an announcement at the end of December of last year saying that, talking about having a successor chapter for Refuge Portland. This is that. So any transition plan for things like Catalyst, Ritual Scrolls, LCS stuff, we're gonna have a transition plan for that shortly, and as soon as they've had time to discuss it as staff, and I've kind of created what that policy is going to look like, we're going to publish that out in the world through this server, and then they'll also be posting it through their own.
I do want to preface that it should be pretty minimal. The magic items shouldn't have to change or anything. There is going to need to be some technical work done on the database, but the intent is to just change the Portland chapter name and codes straight over to Oregon City / Orc.
Let's go.
They have their own Discord to answer your question, Roy. It was posted in the announcements, and then we should get it to our Discord links.
Yep.
Channel. But otherwise, as far as database stuff goes, barring unforeseen technical complications like standard magic items, you shouldn't need to change those or even have the tags reprinted. The item codes should still be functional for you to register them. And then I can't speak for that chapter completely, but the only things that might need that will necessarily need some sort of reissuing or rehoming potentially are Catalyst and Ritual Scrolls, the same as if a campaign had closed, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But I'm definitely going to be advocating on the side of less printing involved as much as possible. As a former
players and logistics. Yeah. As a former logistics person, yes, this is a kindness. But yeah, as soon as we have more information on what that plan is going to look like, obviously we'll make an announcement here in the server, just like we did with the Discord link earlier, so that people will have a concrete idea of what exactly it is that they are going to require moving forward with, specifically tags from PDX in their games in the future. So keep an eye out for that. As soon as we have it, we will make sure that is publicly available as fast as humanly possible. Spread it far and wide.
And also, since people are... Sorry, Kendall.
After you.
Since some people are probably wondering this, yes, chapter points are just going to be carried over directly.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, our next announcement is that after a search of, I would say not many moons, but enough moons that it's noticeable, we have found a new treasurer for Refuge LARP. Our new Refuge treasurer, his name is Sean Weddick. Some of you might know him as Boostard Jenkins from Boise. The lovable dwarf who we joke has a death wish, but we're not actually sure about it. He is such an amazing member of both the Salt Lake and Boise communities. He is so kind and so incredibly smart and just incredibly I don't know how to say it other than he's just an incredible person in, like, just about every possible area a person can be incredible in. And it's really exciting to, you know, see that he kind of was... First of all, I didn't know he applied until Corin told me he was in, and I was like, you know what? That makes sense. He's the kind of guy who kind of jumps in with, like, both feet into this kind of stuff, and it's very clear that he cares about not only the chapters that he plays in, but the organization as a whole, and it's really exciting to kind of see him step into that role and be treasurer. So big shout out to him. He's amazing, and we're just really excited to see what he does as treasurer. So yeah, those are our kind of big announcement things. Big, exciting, new, happy changes across the board. Who could ask for more, really? But with that, we're gonna get into what we came here for. So we're gonna talk about roleplay. That's one of those kind of like the RP and LARP is actually probably the hardest part about it, because everything else you're like, oh, I have my character sheet that tells me exactly what I can and cannot do in combat. Tells me, like, you know, oh, if they're like, maybe a person with this trait is helpful, and you just happen to have that trait. It's like, you know, your character sheet has very little influence over, like, those RP things, except, you know, the way your character sheet looks influences the way your character acts and behaves and does things. But, like, how does that translate from just being, like, things on a sheet to being like, oh, I'm playing a fully formed person who can do these things, but also isn't a robot. Which is where, like, the roleplay part of it comes in. So, I'm gonna say this before I kind of launch too far into this. If you guys have any questions, just start posting them now, and then I'll kind of finish my spiel, and then we'll go directly into questions. So if you have any questions or anything, just kind of slap them in the chat, and we'll address them as the conversation kind of ebbs and flows. So I suppose we should start by defining, like, what roleplay even is. Because if it's true that a LARP is a form of, you know, most definitions when you Google what LARP is, it's you know, it's a form of role-playing game that is played in person, face-to-face, by people embodying their characters, instead of just, like, sitting at a table and rolling dice, which is all fun and well and good. I love me some tabletop role-playing games. Like, the live action part of it is what makes it different. And while the principle of what roleplay is sort of remains the same, in practice it's a little bit different, because you're looking someone in the eye, you know, like, if you're, you know, playing a character that's an elf, you know, it's not just written on a character sheet. It's like, oh, I dressed in fantasy garb and I have elf ears on and this is who I am, right? So you're embodying this entity as a fully formed, fully dressed individual, as opposed to just like, oh, I have this cool character sheet and some dice. And while the basic principles remain the same, the kind of execution is what's a little bit different. So I suppose we are best suited by starting out with what roleplay is, and then what roleplay isn't. Because there's a lot of, you know, I don't know. I wouldn't say there's confusion, but, like, it helps to know these things, especially if, like, roleplay is something that you don't think that you're as good at, or something that is intimidating to you. Typically, in most circumstances, what is considered roleplay, quote-unquote, is just those character interactions that you're, you know, in character. You are talking to other people who are also in character, and you're essentially, like, it's just kind of like having a conversation, but instead of it being like Kendall talking to Corin, it's like Ariella talking to one of, I can't remember your character's name. There we go. We're doing great. I didn't totally just take a nap. It's fine. But, like, and, you know, Ariella's opinions might be different than mine, right? So, like, I might be like, you know, this is just an example. I don't actually believe what I'm about to say, but, like, I could play a character who believes necromancy is fine. Like, it's totally fine. Like, everything's well, everything's good, right, with necromancy. I, as a person who knows how the rules work, don't have that opinion. But my character, who is not necessarily aware of the meta of how, you know, who isn't aware they're in a game, right? Like, that's the thing about it, is like, I, as Kendall, can know that I'm playing a game, but my character is like, no, this is my real life, and these are my real opinions, and I think this is okay, right? And then I say those words to a character that doesn't have that opinion, who thinks that necromancy is bad, and we have a conversation about necromancy as a, you know, a group of people, whatever. This conversation occurs.
I'm sure it's completely civil and even-toned.
Completely civil and even-toned, and I'm not going to be dragged away in shackles ever in my life. It's fine. But essentially, we're having these conversations about in-game things in an in-game setting, and it's fun and interesting, but we also are doing that with the ability to, like, step back into ourselves as real people and be like, okay, that, you know, made me feel feelings. I'm gonna go take a seat somewhere else while I process my real feelings about this fake thing that just happened. That's a really sort of important part of this that we'll get into later. We'll talk about character bleed a little bit later on. But essentially, that's what roleplay is, right? Like, you're in the game, you're talking about in-game things in an in-game way with other people who are talking about in-game things in an in-game way. Now, that maybe kind of trivializes how easy and or difficult it might be for people to engage in that behavior, because talking to people is hard, always and forever. I think that's just a thing that tends to happen, especially if you're walking into the middle of a big campaign that's got a lot of information being shot at you from, like, 13 different directions by, like, 13 different people at varying positions in this fictional hierarchy, and you're just like, okay, this is a lot. I have a lot of questions. And similarly to how, you know, our kind of mantra during the Fireside for new players was, don't be afraid to ask questions on an out-of-game level. Definitely don't be afraid to ask questions on an in-game level, because some of the most meaningful RP I've ever done have been like, hey, someone said this thing that didn't make sense to me. Can you explain to me what it is? Right? So it's as easy as just being like, asking a question, getting an answer. And then if that question spawns another question, ask another question. Like, that is essentially the way it works, right? There are, however, like, a few things that maybe I'm trivializing it. And again, if anybody, I know a few of you kind of hopped in a little bit late. If you have any questions or statements or things that you want to, like, post in the chat of, like, hey, this is a thing that helped me, I'm totally down to hear that and to have that kind of available for people as well. So don't be afraid to do that. But, like, within the confines of, like, what roleplay is, obviously we need to kind of understand what it isn't, right? So, like, RP is not, you know, two people having an out-of-game conversation in an in-game space. It's not, you know, something that, you know, we want to make sure that we're, you know, if there is tension between characters, that we're handling it responsibly, and that, like, that tension doesn't become out-of-game, like, frustrations between players, right? So we want to make sure that we're being communicative, and we want to make sure that we're like, hey, I have this opinion, but I, as a player, still love and care about you as a person, and we're gonna, you know, proceed with that understanding, right? So always being aware, you know, it's not an excuse to be mean to each other. It's not an excuse to, like, you know, say things out of pocket, you know, that are, you know, strange and potentially, like, you know, hurtful, right? We don't want to hurt our friends in real life. We want to make sure that we're able to create a space that is fostering that fun community for everyone. So we don't want to, you know, use roleplay as an excuse to, like, say hurtful things and think we can, you know, get away with it. We want to make sure that we're being respectful and kind and like, willing to hear people out when they're saying things to us that, like, you know, like, if someone's like, hey, that little thing that you just did kind of cut a little close to the quick, maybe don't do that again. You know, we want to make sure that we're being, you know, good role players, good friends, good members of the community, and being like, ooh, sorry, won't do that again. Just, like, be good, decent human beings about it. I don't think that's a problem with anybody in this community. Like, just be good.
If I may?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to stress that, like, in roleplay, especially in high intensity situations, can have a lot of loaded emotions, and you can have moments where you get a lot of feelings welling out up from nowhere, and you don't know where they're coming from. And sometimes you say something or feel something or react in a way that is surprising and upsetting for you. So we want to have some amount of grace for people, but at the same time, we do generally want to like care about each other's experiences and not blow each other off. So like, there's definitely some complexity involved about like which parts of those experiences are the feelings that you are responsible for, your own feelings, and which parts are like you're responsible for how you were affecting another person. But you know, generally, I think the hard line is role play is never a carte blanche to violate the code of conduct. That will always reign supreme over everything.
Yeah. And, you know, yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. It's definitely important to remember that as, you know, every member of this community, from the highest level to the lowest level, you know, to the newest person who just stuck their toe in the door, is accountable to that code of conduct. And, you know, we want to make sure that, you know, we're kind of putting our money where our mouth is in that regard, and making sure that, like, oh, if I'm going to be held accountable for the way that I act, then I should be mindful of the way that I act. So that's definitely...
And also, each individual chapter may have its own policies and guidelines or structures for how to engage with, like, check-ins or other situations. So, like, your local chapters are also definitely a resource for you in this.
Yeah. I definitely, like, doesn't Calgary have, like, Calgary has, like, a whole document about, like, you know, the way, you know, check-ins, their romantic RP and all of that as well. So, like, definitely, at the chapter level, make sure that you're, you know, doing everything you can to, you know, make sure that that's a good situation for everyone. But...
And if you're not sure, just, like, ask somebody, ask a staff rep, or, like, especially a player rep.
It's like, don't be afraid to ask questions to Electric Boogaloo. Roleplay. But also, who here in this call has played a tabletop role-playing game, regardless of genre, regardless of setting? Like, who's done that? Probably all of us. I don't, at least, well, most of it. I'm not going to speak for everyone, but, like, I know, Roy has. Yeah. Roy never heard of a TTRPG, says the guy obsessed with Critical Role. It's fine. But, like...
Wait, Kate, are you serious?
No way.
Like, no judgment, but...
I don't know. Well, no, it's because Kate's been LARPing their whole life, so they have not.
It's true.
Kate's been LARPing since she was knee-high to a grasshopper. I don't think she's had time for TTRPGs.
That's like the, you know, going to college when you're 12 years old
Fair.
Version of roleplay.
That's so true. Just like, yes, hello, I'm a child and I need to interact with adults like I'm an adult. Whew. Wild. But you've definitely encountered, like, roleplay, right? Like, I, for instance, just finished a 1.5 year long campaign in the Fallout setting, right? And so the RP looks very different in that than it would in, like, D&D than it does in, you know, a high fantasy LARP, right? So being aware, I think, also of, like, setting and tone, and, like, there's a time for the, you know, the time and place rule, as my dad used to call it, is like there's a time and a place for everything, right? And not everything can be addressed in the moment, if it can even be addressed at all. Like, LARP has this habit of just, like, you know, you're walking up the staircase, and then the staircase turns into a slide, and all you do for the rest of the weekend is just, you're in the thing, and, like, half the time it feels like you don't even have time to think about anything other than this strict set of things that you are doing ever at all, right? So, like, it kind of, you can get swept up in stuff, and it's so easy to be, like, emotionally invested and to feel so, like, strongly about whatever the thing is that you're doing, right? But just remember, at the end of the day, you know, our characters have their feelings and emotions and opinions and beliefs, right? But also, like, if it becomes difficult for you to, like, separate yourself from the character that you're playing, like, it's okay to take breaks. It's okay for you to take a moment and be like, I don't know why I feel this way, so I'm gonna do some, you know, it's, you know, just go find a, you know, I used to, at our site, at the Salt Lake site in Wyoming, to be like, ooh, I'm a little heated right now, and I don't know why. I'm gonna go find a tree to sit under in this vast forest that we are surrounded by, and just, like, take a breather, right? Because at the end of the day, it's a game. And our friends are our friends, and we want our friends to stay our friends, and I'm speaking for myself here. I have this really bad habit of, like, just letting things sit. It's not a good thing to do, right? Like, yeah. So, like, I will admit that I have a weakness in this area because I'm still working through it to this, you know, we're still working on it. But it is okay for you, like, if there's this high intensity roleplay moment, for you to go find a spot, be it a bathroom stall or a secluded corner of the woods or your bed, you know, just put a white headband on and take a nap. I've done that. Guilty as charged. But, like, your feelings are valid, but, like, there might not always be, like, we want to make sure that we're feeling our feelings in a healthy way and not taking things out on our friends that are meant for their characters as well. So, if someone, you know, you're having an interaction, necromancy's great, necromancy's super bad. Like, you're having that argument, you're having that conversation, and then all of a sudden something in your brain, like your real person brain, is like, that didn't feel great. Don't be afraid to just be like, can't do this right now. I'm gonna walk away. Because you gotta do what's good for you. Okay, sorry, my Google Doc has gone away, and I don't know why. There it is. Okay, so, any questions? Any thoughts? Any information that you think? Alright. Darcy says it can be so hard to roleplay for just a whole weekend. Keeping it up beyond the few hours or so a TTRPG game goes for is a unique LARP challenge. That's true. That's why, you know, kind of goes back to the, like, take breaks. You know, if you're going to take a break because, you know, I have, you know, nerve pain in my leg, for instance. Like, if I'm going to go sit down for 30 minutes because my nerve pain's acting up, then I can totally go sit down for 30 minutes because, you know, brain go burr and I just need a second, right? So, like, don't be afraid to, you know, do the things you need to do to have the experience that you want to have, right? Like, that's essentially all the information. There are some people who like to stay up until, like, 4 a.m. doing shenanigans. I'm looking at you, Kate. And then there are people who are like, I'm gonna go to bed early. And they do those things because that's the way that they have fun. And they take care of themselves. And, like, especially when, you know, something like being in character and role-playing is difficult by its nature because you're divesting yourself from this character that you're playing. Like, it just takes a lot of energy to do that. Like, don't be afraid to take care of yourself. Like, and that goes physically, mentally, you know, emotionally, all those things matter. So don't be afraid to, like, take breaks. Yes, be called out, Roy. Be called out. As you should be. I'm kidding. I'm not, this isn't a call out message, but, yeah. So the main sort of thing that I kind of wanted to get across with all of that is that, like, it's different for every person, right? And, like, the gateway to entry is, or the barriers to entry can be it can be intimidating, because you're like, oh, I'm new here, I don't know anyone, and I'm expected to, like, retain all of this information that is being thrown at me from all sides. It can be challenging, especially when you're new, and especially when you have questions. But remember, don't be afraid to ask questions. Asking questions is the lifeblood of the LARPer. Tell me I'm wrong. So, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. You know, again, if you're presenting your case, if you're confused or frustrated or whatever, like, that's fair. But, like, do what you gotta do to take care of yourself. If that's, you know, if those in-game frustrations are becoming out-of-game frustrations, we want to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves and being aware of that. I totally sleep normal hours at LARP events, Kate. I'm pretty sure that I went to bed at like 1 a.m. once, and I left you in the tavern, and you didn't go to bed. I was back in there for breakfast, and you were still sitting almost exactly where I left you, so I don't think that's true. But yeah. Okay. So, we're gonna move on towards, like, roleplay and the kind of expectations that kind of go with that. And we're gonna move forward into some, like, tips and tricks that I have found work for me. Again, y'all can take what I say with a grain of salt. If you're like, that's weird, I don't know how that works for you, totally fine. But it kind of, these are things that over my years of LARPing have sort of helped me become a more aware role player. So we kind of touched on what I call the time and place rule, right? You know, if there's an important, or, you know, if there's an important RP moment where this NPC is coming in and giving, you know, this moment is occurring. I'm going to use something that happened in Boise as an example that was very both funny and also very terrifying for my character. So, in Karos, there was this organization called League, and the guy who ran League was this guy called the Spider King. Little did we know that the Spider King was just kind of going a little bit insane because of these artifact weapons that he had. And, he comes in, he's dragging this representative from another country into the tavern and accusing her of killing his assistant, his aide, Senna. Okay, my character had gone through the circle, and my character has two overprotective cousins and one overprotective brother. I went through the circle earlier in the day, and Bustard was out and about doing other things, so I had not told him yet that happened. Cousin Bernard is like, hey, Bustard, just so you know, Ariella went through the circle. He's outside. He is walking inside, yelling my character's name, and I'm like, why is he yelling? And then he comes inside, and as this scene is happening, the Spider King essentially turns on him and threatens to kill him if he doesn't, like, stop interrupting, right? So my character immediately went, this is not the time or the place for us to have this conversation when there is literally a person whose life is on the line standing 5 feet away from us. And so we kind of, like, it was me and I think Avidilts and, like, Amaranth were like, nope, we're gonna go out here. We're gonna have this conversation away from the guy who can kill you with a thought. Okay. So, like, time and place, right? Like, the function of the batteries is, like, we needed to have that conversation, did not need to have that conversation in that moment. So just, like, there are times when like, things like that happen, and it's like, oh, like, I'm a forgetful person. I wouldn't have been surprised if I had genuinely forgotten to tell him for, like, the rest of the event, and no one else brought it up, right? So, like, there's a time and a place for everything. You know, when there's a guy who's already angry and you're yelling over his yelling, probably not the best time to have a conversation with your sister about how she went through the circle. Maybe not. But, like, there are also times when, like, those kinds of things are important, right? Because if, you know, let's say there's this in-character moment where an NPC comes in and is giving out incorrect information, and bad things could happen if, like, you have the correct information if you don't intercede, right? Like, there's a lot of different, like, situational things that are super important for us to be aware of. So, like, there's a time and a place for everything. And if it's that important to you, and it's that important to your character to have those moments where, like, this is the time and this is the place, even if it's not convenient, great. There might be pushback from other characters about that, but, like, if your character is that strong in their convictions about, like, you need to know this information, you need to know it now, because this decision that you're making might be made differently if you have this piece of information that I have, or whatever. Just, like, I guess situational awareness might be the best way to kind of phrase that. Developing that, knowing full well that sometimes there are moments for comment. There's moments for, like, in those tense moments where, like, you just make a joke and you crack the tension like an egg, and it's the funniest thing that happens all weekend. Like, there's time for that. There's a place for that, but, like, sometimes you're gonna swing and it's gonna miss. I've done that more times than I can count. You take the big swing and you just miss, you strike out entirely. But, like, don't let that discourage you, because I know that, like, it can be kind of like, ooh, I tried to be funny and it didn't land, that kind of awkwardness that comes from that. But, like, your moment will come. And if you let that kind of, like, kind of turn that part of your character off, essentially, like, ooh, I chose a bad time to try to be funny, so I'm never going to be funny again. Like, you don't have to do that. I encourage you not to, because, it just kind of, like, the way that you want your character to be is important, and so, like, don't just let, like, one person being like, that was a bad thing you just did, or one person just kind of, like, being a little stern, or a little, like, that wasn't super funny, even though I know that's what you were trying to do. Like, that's just kind of the way of the world. When you're interacting with people, they're not always going to respond the way you hope they will, but that shouldn't stop you from saying and doing the things that you think are important, or that you believe in, as good and right things. But also, something that I do is, I try really hard to understand why my characters feel the way they feel about things before I play them the first time. So, like, I do a lot of looking at, like, the lore of the world, and, like, the understanding of, like, oh, my character is from this culture, so in this set of things, this is, this might be how they feel. There's always room for growth away from those original sort of mindsets and opinions. But, like, having that understanding of, like, I created this person from this place for this reason, and they feel this way about XYZ thing. Like, I play, my Boise character is a Realmsworn, so obviously the thing we get from Realmsworn, necromancy things from the outside, no bueno. We don't like those. 0 out of 10. Do not recommend. She's from a place called the Dromar Clanlands, and honor is super important in Dromar, and, like, you earn your place in your clan, you earn titles if you are given them, like, honor is, like, your prized possession. So, like, that was the thing that was super important to her as well. And, like, the importance of honoring your, like, if you make a promise, honoring your commitments, being that kind of person, right? So, like, that was her framework when I started playing her. 2.5 years later, she's very different. Not in, like, big, important ways that matter, but, like, she's very different now than, like, that original framework was going to kind of make her out to be. And it's because of an in-game time that I spent 4.5 real-life hours interpreting the most legalese little kobold contract that ever was written. And then all of a sudden everyone's like, oh, Ariel is gonna help us write the laws, and she can help us with the kobolds because she knows what they want. And I'm like, oh, I was supposed to be a bit of a jackass, and now everybody likes me. Oh, okay, alright. I guess this is just gonna just be me now. Which, like, honestly, some of the best, roleplay moments I've ever had kind of came out of that, right? But, like, you gotta be, you gotta understand that, like, the character that you want to play doesn't always end up being the character that you play, but also, that's okay, because if your character just stayed one-dimensional and the same the entire time you played them, that would stop being fun. And if the point of coming to LARP is to have fun, then like, evolution and growth and change, those things that happen to you as a real-life person, also should be, allowed to happen to your characters, because that's how they, become well-rounded, fictional people, I don't know where I was going with that. It just plummeted right into the ground. But we're gonna move on to the next topic now. Let's see. Corey, does anyone have any... Sorry, I'm, like, looking for questions. This but in reverse. I will set my alarm for 7:30, and I will wake up at 7:30. No snooze. Click. Bed of lies. I will go to bed at 7:30.
Bed of lies at LARP.
Kate, absolutely. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions or thoughts that you want to share with the group here? I'm doing a lot of talking. I do that a lot, and I don't mean to. Yeah. We're gonna... Okay, back to the Google Doc. Sorry. Okay. And then, kind of one of the last things that I wanted to touch on, kind of, is... we have this thing, obviously, in the world called consent, right? And there are people, who are kind of, we have consent marshals in Salt Lake City. We have, like, those people that are kind of, like, our framework of, like, okay, this really antagonistic, icky, no good, very bad thing just happened, but, like, are you okay? Like, that's kind of their role. With roleplay, in LARP, as in life, that you have these moments that get super heated and super, like, you want to grab someone by their face and just be like, are you kidding me? Kind of, like, stressful, kind of sort of, like, angry, like, whatever kind of moments that may happen. But we also live in a world where people have experienced things, where people are, at different points in their lives, that, like, getting yelled at to their face might not be great. Like, that might accidentally, set something off in them that you didn't mean to. Like, I've never met a person in this LARP who's like, yes, I want to hurt people's feelings on purpose. That's not the kind of people that I understand, play this game. But it's super important that, like, if a person says, hey, can we do this differently? Like, there was, an instance where I was playing an NPC who was, like, super aggressive and, like, super, like, come on, like, why don't you understand this or this or this, right? Like, stuff that my NPC thought was like, oh, this is easy peasy stuff, and it's just going right over your head. And the way I was doing it was, like, super intense. And then, the player put her hand on her head and was like, hey, can we mellow this out a little bit? Like, you're not doing anything wrong or anything, but it's just, like, my actual real life self is responding to this in a way that's probably not going to be super great. And I was like, okay, I'll back off. We'll start over. Totally fine, right? So we want to... Goes back to, like, respecting our friends, honoring the code of conduct, but, like, just be respectful of, where people are at. Like, people might explain to you, like, for me, I can't be involved in, like, if we're doing loud group combat in a small indoor space, I can't do it. Like, so, like, when I, like, see that that's happening, I'll just tap the mod runner on their shoulder and be like, hey, I gotta go. And they're like, totally understand. It's all good. And if someone says that to you kind of regarding a roleplay moment, if you're being too angry, or if you're saying kind of things that might cut close to the quick, just, like, if they choose to disengage, let them. And if they choose to explain to you why they did, then they will. But, like, just kind of respect is key, You know, even if you're asked, like, hey, are you okay? You know, ask the person that you're RPing with. You know, make sure that you're on the same page if you're gonna do an aggressive thing or like a romantic thing. Especially make sure that you're on the same page with the people that you're, you know, RPing with in that way. Just like be aware of the fact that like behind the character is a real person and act accordingly, essentially, is the best way to put it. Jason says, I spent the first year of LARP playing my elf without interacting with the town. I would leave my cabin where I was alone for town fights and then return to my cabin after. What is the best way as a new player to get into the role playing with others the most fastest? The fastest, I believe is what that says. I might have a different opinion on this because, again, this is what worked for me. What is it? You know, curiosity killed the cat, right? I had a lot of information that I needed to get very quickly from a lot of people that I had never met before in my life. Like, we were in the middle of, like, you know, it was the earlier part of, you know, the Etheria campaign, but it was still in the middle, so there was a lot of information that I had missed entirely. And so I was just, you know, my character, especially because she came to the game not knowing anything, had so many questions. Like, she was like a toddler who's like, when you're like, okay, time to go put your shoes on, and they say, why? And they're like, because it's cold outside. Why? Like, just that whole, like, set of things. Is like finding a place, or like finding a you know, a place where you think your character might fit in, be that with the other fighters or like the Healers Guild or the Celestial Scholars or like whatever. Like, find that little corner of the world that you fit in, just like by your character build, and just ask questions. Because, you know, even in a new campaign, right, like, you know, you can play a character that, like, you know, like, you could theoretically play that typical, like, low intelligence character that's like, I'm here for a good time, not a long time, what's going on? Or you can, like, you know, play a character who knows a lot and wants to share that knowledge with people. But, like, the way it kind of boils down to, like, what you want your character to be and what you feel the most comfortable doing. So, like, if it's not easy for you to go into a group of strangers and be like, hey, it's me, I'm new here, tell me all of your secrets, then that's fine. But, like, doing that with, like, a smaller group of people is also helpful, because in other, you know, in another game that I play, my character is, you know, part of the Wardens, which they're a group of people responsible for kind of, like, looking after our upper leadership. You know, we essentially are their guards. And so I didn't feel comfortable reaching out to everyone in the faction and being like, hey, I want to be your friend. But, like, that group of, like, 13 people, we were all wardens. We were all, like, we were bonded together through that experience of being the warden, like, being the wardens. Like, then I had that group of people to then go into the faction at large with and feel a lot more confident. If that makes sense. Darcy says, also be open to letting the extroverts adopt you. That's true. That's how I ended up in the Bleeding Eye. Katie was like, you're mine now. And I was like, cool, I'm yours now, I guess. And I
got some thoughts here if you got some space.
Always.
So I think this is one of the things that's going to be a little more difficult to answer. Like, this can vary a lot from person to person, especially for folks who are a little more introverted or shy or don't know many people at the LARP. I think what she said about, like, kind of finding a niche for yourself helps a lot. I think that, you know, also what a couple people have talked about like getting involved with a group helps. I think generally if it's something you're try and get out of your comfort zone a little bit. You know, you don't need to like go charging out of it, but a little bit here and there. Talk to other people, ask them about their characters. People mostly love to ask about their characters unless they're playing somebody shady, in which case they might get suspicious. But that's a.
Why do you need to know? Sorry, I was just trying to be nice.
What are you after? Are you cop? But I think one other thing that, and this can be a little bit, your mileage may vary, but occasionally doing something risky or impulsive in character can get you hooked into some roleplay real fast. You don't want to go too out there and kind of like, you know, defy the whole town or adventuring group, or I don't know, get an entire population of civilians kidnapped by the Fae, unless you're ready for some major confrontation. But
or
like, that can be some character defining stuff.
Yeah, definitely don't poison the whole town on your birthday either because you're bored. Definitely don't do that. I didn't do that. I know someone who did, though.
Are we talking about miasma?
Yes.
I don't know. I think a player that worked for them.
Oh no.
Maybe. I'm not sure.
The Plover had so much fun with that, but the blowback was monumental. And so like if that's not a thing you enjoy, like if you don't enjoy being the center of attention or like people being antagonistic towards you, maybe don't go that far to the extreme of like, I'm gonna get everyone's attention because I'm bored. But like that definitely
definitely there is. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and like that may work for you if you're just like, I am an agent of chaos. Then that's not bad chaos, but like chaos in its true form. Like if that's just what you are, then that's fine. But like, I don't know, like that's a situational thing, kind of just like you were saying, like the whole your mileage.
Yeah, it is something that like I'm trying to add some caveats to, so I'm not sure if I'm like hobbling it into oblivion here. But because like there is definitely this is a game about a lot of people and a lot of players involved, and so like I have definitely seen more than once the perils of somebody going in with their very first character and playing the type of, I'm going to steal from people. Or I'm gonna be edgy or something else, some form of like in character antisocial, and it's gone not well for them because that they've essentially engaged in some degree of player versus player without like understanding how, or character versus character without understanding how like that can blow back on the character. Like there are consequences, and then that can turn into some very serious bleed that's not fun. But like at the same time, if you're going into something and you're making if you as the player are deciding to have your character make a bad decision on purpose, like that can be some really defining roleplay.
Yeah.
If you're willing to like meet other people halfway and not like let go of your expectations for how that will play out.
Yeah, for sure. Jason says, hang on.
That's kind of, I don't know if this is the best bit of roleplay advice, but like it is definitely something that led to like my first character's most interesting and arc.
Yeah. Okay. Jason says, my advice for new players is as outlandish as it may sound for introverts like me is to introduce yourself. Even if you want to play the shady rogue, helping others help you by telling them what you're cool sharing, and as far as your general skill set and goals are, I guarantee someone will rope you in from there. That is true. That's very true. At least for me, again, kind of like your mileage may vary thing. I've just had very interesting sort of character development situations in this game that my Boise character, my Salt Lake character, who, just like, my Salt Lake character kind of got yoinked into something and then dragged along for the ride for 4.5 years, but then, like, it's so interesting, like, to play a character that knows exactly who they are, knows exactly who they are, knows exactly what they believe, knows exactly how they're going to act on those beliefs at any given time. Like, all of those, it's such a different experience to be like, I have no memories, and I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm just here because I want to be helpful, versus like, oh, I'm here because I have to keep my brother alive, but I'm also here because this is important, and it needs to be done, and there's things to explore. Definitely two different experiences that I'm speaking from here, not necessarily the same one. Kitty says, also just lingering around where people are, like the tavern. Plot tends to go where the players are gathered, and getting involved in plot helps you have something to talk to people about. That is also true. Ooh, Darcy said, one time I followed some nice elves who said they had information for me out into the back alley behind the tavern. It led to some good fun. Who died? Darcy. Was it you? Or was it them?
Got amnesia'd.
Oh, Jesus. Jeebus. The one time I've gotten amnesia'd, it was willingly, so. I didn't die. Ooh. That's uncomfy.
Ooh.
It's a bad day for everyone. Okay. Let's see. We've got some time left. The last thing I wanted to talk about is character bleed. Because here's the thing. Sometimes the game gets us good. Okay? Sometimes it happens. The game gets you good. So, okay. Essentially, character bleed is when your emotions bleed over between the player and the character in either direction. So, like, you as the player influence your character, or your character influences the player. Either one of those things. And when that happens, this is something, again, that I have had to be very aware of. Because, like I said earlier, I have this really bad habit of holding on to things, right? Like, something happens and I get real angsty about it real fast. And I don't know how to articulate my feelings all the time, so I let them sit there. And that's not good. Because that's just sad. But, like, being aware of when that is happening. Sometimes it's difficult if you've not, like, role-played before, so, like, Kate's a special case. But, like, if you've never, like, before you come to LARP, like, if you've never played a TTRPG, you've never encountered role-play in a space before, it's really difficult to notice when that is happening to you. Roy says different people take a different amount of time to process character bleed. That is true. And some people come into this hobby not even fully aware of that being a thing. I know I didn't know it was a thing, really, at all. Or because I'd RP'd in spaces, but I'd never experienced it before, so I didn't know it had a name, right? And it can be so dependent on where you're at from one moment to another. Also accurate. So, the thing that kind of, when it comes to character bleed, is that, it is so unique from person to person, right? Like, for me, like I was saying, I can't do, like, loud group combat in small interior spaces. The reason why has to do with my time in the military, and, like, it just, the noise gets me, and it just, I'm lost. Gone, not present. So, like, that's why I had to learn, as I was LARPing, I never encountered those problems in a D&D game or a TTRPG, because I'm not in a room with other people who are swinging swords and making calls, and it's loud, and I have to I have to be loud so that people can hear what I'm saying, so it's just like a whole bunch of jumble in my head that just turns me off, right? Like, literally, Kendall.exe has stopped responding. And so, I had to learn. Like, to me, I was like, that's a weird thing that just happened. Why did I freak out like that? And then I, like, sat down and I thought about it, and I was like, that's why I freaked out like that, right? So you have to be willing, like, be introspective, right? Like, when you're feeling those things, when you're like, I don't know where this came from. I don't know why I feel that way. I don't know why, like, this silly little guy said a silly little thing and I'm irrationally angry about it. Like, you have to be, willing to, be introspective and to be, kind of look at yourself. Because I think, you know, it's the worst thing ever. It's so sad. And, you know, I've never had, you know, this happen to me necessarily, but, like, when you are playing this game, and it is a game, that's an important thing to remember, even though it is a thing that you are standing in the middle of. You are there, you are present as a person, both human being and character. That, at the end of the day, Ariella Jenkins and I and Kendall Merritt are two different people. And so Ariella may have had this thing happen that made her really upset and really angry and really sad. But I, as Kendall, did not have that happen. I get to go to afters and hang out with my friends and eat good food and talk about the game that just happened, right? So, like, being, like, mindful of your limits, also knowing, like, what they are, and then, like, if there are people that you trust enough to, like, be like, hey, if this happens and I'm not, like, fully aware of it, can you just, like, let me know, right? Because most people, you know, let's just say when I started LARPing, I didn't have a complete understanding of the things that would, like, cause bleed for me, right? Because, again, never had that problem in a D&D game, never, like, encountered it until I was in the real life space with other people in situations I couldn't control, right? Jason says if it LARPs, it bleeds. That's true. That is 100% true. So, my thing, I guess, if we're kind of making this don't be afraid to ask questions to Electric Boogaloo, I will also tack on, like, don't be afraid to ask for help. Because sometimes you need it. Like, at the end of the day, like, our brains, fickle things these are. They just are. And, you know, Corin kind of had a good point here. It can be so dependent on where you're at from one moment to another. Like, if I've had a rough week at work or the rest of life, I'm going to probably have to be more mindful of my feelings of and bleed at an event. Or even if I just forgot to eat breakfast. What a mood. That is deeply relatable, the breakfast thing, because hangry is a thing. Hangry is a thing. Mm-hmm. You know, kind of going back to that, if it LARPs, it bleeds. Like, that's definitely true. And there are definitely a lot of people who...
There was going to be a ritual around, like, de-transforming somebody from being a werewolf or whatever. I would say the catalyst should be a Snickers bar.
You're not you when you're hungry. But yeah, hangry is real. Sleep deprived is real. I don't know. I turn into a goofball when I don't get enough sleep. Like, all of these things are things that, you know, happen just naturally and are, you know, biological, our brain's way of being like, you didn't get enough sleep or you didn't eat. You should go do those things. And then the more you kind of push yourself past that limit, the more your body's like, hey, listen. And that can kind of cause, like, these kind of weird sort of, not necessarily out of pocket, but, like, interactions that, like, are not traditionally standard, and it's just because you're hungry, right? And, like, you want to be careful that, like, you know, again, it is a map.
FOMO at LARP is real.
Yeah, for sure. But like the main kind of piece of information with this is that it is a thing that can like go both ways, right? So like if I didn't eat, I'm all, Ariel is angry because Kendall is hangry. Or Kendall is sad. Kendall is suddenly sad and like heartbroken and whatever because of XYZ thing that happened in game that like Ariella is, that happened to her and not to Kendall, but like Kendall's just like in her feelings about it. There's like room for that, I think. Like it's good and healthy for us to like feel feelings about the stories that we're a part of, but like maybe like do some introspection, like do some looking at yourself, especially if you're newer to the hobby and haven't necessarily experienced it the way that other more experienced players have. Just like sit yourself to, like, I have this thing that I do even at LARP. Like I do this thing where I pull out my notebook. I have a journal every morning and I just kind of write what's in my head for a few minutes, and like that kind of helps me both get into and out of character because it's getting all of those thoughts down on the paper, and it's like helping me create the structure of like, this is her, this is me. I get that's not for everyone. Like no one wants to spend the extra time in their morning when they could be sleeping writing in a notebook, but like it helps me kind of like get from one place to another mentally, because like being at LARP is a great, like emotionally, like it's a rush, right? You hit the highs and then you get the lows, and it's just good. You feel like you're being a hero and that you're making change in the world, and that's a great thing. But sometimes like that high becomes a boof and you just fall off a cliff all of a sudden, and like everyone's we're all experiencing that LARP drop, I guess is what it is, right? Where you're just like, this was great.
That could be on Fireside.
Yeah, could do. Might do. We're gonna have a list of topics. We're gonna have a new poll for next month. Not too long from now.
Yeah.
But
if I could add something to that.
Yeah.
This part of various players. Oops, Kendall has disappeared into the hot hole.
My chair
various
just broke.
Players have. Oh no!
What the heck? I'll fix that in a second. I'm on the ground.
Okay. Well, you're fixing that. Different players have different relationships with bleed. That's gonna depend a lot on an individual. Some people play for it. Some people avoid it at all costs. There's not really a right answer as long as you are managing it in a healthy way, which can depend, how that looks. It also depends, varies from person to person. But like, bleed isn't an experience we get just from LARP or just from role playing. Like this ties into what is more broadly called catharsis. Going all the way back to Aristotle for all his other numerous faults as a philosopher. Because like this is the feeling we get when, or at least for me, these are like the same kinds of feelings I get when I watch a movie or a show, or I'm reading a book or listening to some music that just hits me the right way. So like that can be very emotionally rewarding, and then also like using role play to explore parts of yourself that you really can't in the same way in your day-to-day life.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
there's definitely pitfalls, but there's also rewards there if that's something. And if that's not the part of roleplay you want, if that's not what is appealing to you about LARP and roleplay, that's fine too.
Yeah. Okay, I'm back. Sorry, I was
just
literally...
try not to yuck on what other people enjoy unnecessarily.
Yes. But yeah. That is all good advice. Sorry, guys. I did not mean to plummet into the bowels of my bedroom just then, but my chair broke.
I mean, at least it happened when I had something to say.
Yeah. Still embarrassing. I'm still embarrassed, but yeah. Does anyone else... Okay, so we've kind of gone over, like, what roleplay is, what roleplay isn't. Things like consent, how we make roleplay work for us, those kinds of things. Does anyone else have any statements, questions, sort of, in the next, like, 15-ish minutes that we can answer for you regarding this? It is kind of one of those vague, like, elusive things, and it is kind of difficult because it is just so different from person to person.
I know we spent a lot of time talking about bleed more so than, like, role play, like, sort of, I guess, more detailed role play situations and tips. So if you have questions about that, we can, like,
I did see Mitch. Yeah, I did see Mitch mention that helping, like that. Every chapter has, like, its online roleplay spaces as well. And Mitch said that him engaging with those really kind of helped him pick up on the vibes, you know, of the situation. Right? So, like, it's, you know, again, Mitch arrived even later in Etheria than I did. So it was definitely, like, you know, one of those situations where, like, oh, this is, forget the frying pan, I am in the fire. So having those, like, online roleplay spaces, like, I think I read up through, like, the tavern chat, I read up through, like, the healer's hall chat, the bleeding eye chat, like, all of the chats that I knew that my character would be a part of. I was just kind of like, I'm gonna read up through here, I'm gonna see what the vibe is, just because I want to make sure that I'm not, like, you know, every story has its, you know, the things that it's trying to say, right? And the ways that they're trying to say them. And, like, tone is a part of that. And so, like, being able to interpret, like, being able to infer tone from, like, where the, you know, the online spaces, to transfer that into the game was very helpful to me as well as a baby to the hobby. So I agree with that 100%. Darcy says, if your chapter has out-of-game meetups, Calgary has had a lot of new players drop by Wings Night before events to get to know some people out-of-game to help them get the vibe before coming in-game. That's true. So, like, Salt Lake City, we have Craft Night, we have our Craft Nights, we have Fight Nights when the weather's well enough. We all do, like, just enjoy hanging out with each other, so we'll make space to do that as well. It is true, like, getting to know people on an out-of-game level, like, who was Katie Lewis Coring, who most people who know her, like, this is the sweetest person on earth. She intimidated the hell out of me before I knew her to be the sweetest person on earth. And, like, we had an open house, and then she was like, hey, you know, we're having people over, like, I'm having people over for XYZ thing, and, you know, you're super cool, and I think you're great, and I want you to meet everybody so that you'll come play the game. And sure as hell, 6 years later, here I am. So, like, definitely finding ways to get to know people on an out-of-game level. It kind of removes, like, the illusion, right? Like, I'm looking at Jason, who plays Sir Dare, right? Like, when you know what a white belt means in game, but you don't know the person out of game who is wearing the white belt, you're like, oh, that's a knight, that's an important person. What do I do? And they're like, oh god, this other important person just told me to go talk to him, and I'm scared. But I know that Jason's, like, genuinely a chill guy. Jason passes the vibe check in every way, so, like, why am I so scared to talk to his character when I know that Jason is a good person? Like, who's a person who's gonna be helpful, who's gonna be nice, who's gonna, like, be like, oh, you're new here, let me see how I can help you. Like, why did that freak me out so bad? I don't know. But, like, our brains are mean to us sometimes, and that's just the way it is. And kind of breaking the ice kind of on an out-of-game level is also super helpful. Because Darylyn has shit to do. Yes, he does. and he does it well. A question from a newbie. Do you have any specific RP situations to look out for and then their fixes? You mentioned a time when an NPC was having a dramatic plot moment, so you took your own dramatic conversation outside. Are there any similar situations that a new person might not know to look out for yet? I think that depends entirely on the campaign that you're in. I know, just speaking for Ghostlands, like, it's a pretty new campaign, so, like, I don't really know a lot about how, you know, Dane and the plot team are wanting to, like, or essentially, like, you know, I don't know what they want their storytelling necessarily to look like, because we've only had one weekend with it. So what I would say is just, like, on the whole, things to look out for, just, like, in general, or, like, kind of like that situation where, like, if you can tell that, like, oh, that's an NPC who's, like, you know, a recurring NPC who comes in here a lot of the times, and most of the time when she comes in here, she's here to give XYZ type of information to the townspeople. Or, like, hey, look, that's Jack, he's the celestial guy. He typically comes in here when he wants to, you know, see if people want to get invested in the circle, or, like, whatever. Like, if you can pick up on the cues of, like, when this person is here, this typically happens, then that kind of gives you this sort of, like, ability to kind of just be like, oh, hey, I might know a person who's interested in talking to this person. Or, hey, like, this guy's here to talk about Infernals, and I know Kieran is super interested in Infernals. I'm gonna go grab him. Or, like, those kinds of things. Jason just said, look for when people are getting others together for something. That is also true. Most NPCs are, you know, they're the one and doneers that you never see again, who are, like, going to, like, hook people for a mod or whatever. I wouldn't even say, like, those things require fixes per se, but just, like, kind of going back to the whole time and place rule, right? So, like, if something important, like, if you feel like something important is happening, like, if you can tell by looking at someone or infer from their tone or, like, whatever, that what they're there to say is important, then you can kind of infer for, like, your own self or your own character, like, is that something my character cares enough about to go get in the middle of? And if it is, get in the middle of it. I don't know if that helps. That was a lot of words. I keep doing that. But
I mean, it's kind of your job.
Yeah, that's true.
You're one of my words people.
Curse my own skills and talents. But yeah, essentially just, like, I don't know. I guess this is going to sound so weird, but I kind of framework it as people watching is an important part of LARP. Because the more you can pick up on, like, the patterns and, like, the when this person shows up, this happens, or, like, typically, you know, something as simple as, like, oh, it's 6 p.m. and people are screaming. That means it's 6 p.m. and my character sheet reboots, as it does in Ghostlands. Or, like, those kinds of things where, like, you can kind of take cues from the world around you and the people in the world around you. Super helpful, in my experience. But, like, I'm not going to say keep your head on a swivel, because keeping your head on a swivel is a sure kind of way to, like, overwhelm yourself very quickly. But, like, I kind of create my characters with, like, the idea that they're going to come into game and they're going to care mostly about 3 things. And then if other things that come up are tangential to those 3 things, then I'm gonna do those too. But, like, I'm not gonna be like, oh no, there's a cheese horse and I have to go kill it. Like, Ariella doesn't care about, like, the cheese horses. She cares about her family and her friends and making sure people are safe. And, like, the cheese horses are just magical cheese that came to life one day because kitchen staff messed around and found out. But, like, okay, even not plot-related situations, something like if two people are whispering in the corner, maybe you do or don't interrupt them. I don't know if that's positive metagaming, though. I don't know if... I mean, I just kind of view that as having good manners, right? Like, I don't know if good manners are positive metagaming, but if they are, let's have more of them.
Kind of like vibe check. But, like, at the end of the day, if somebody's having a conversation in a public space, like, it's not out of line, it's not any more out of line for your character to, like, ask them, hey, can I join this? Is this a private conversation? Can I join this? What have you, than it would be in real life, basically.
Yeah. It's definitely, you know, I think as far as, like, that goes, right, like, I don't know. I got really good at reading body language at a young age, so I can kind of tell, but, like, again, it never hurts to ask. I typically, as a person who is unintentionally, very situationally unaware at times, try to kind of err on the side of caution of, like, if I can make eye contact with one of them and, like, communicate with my eyes that I'd like to be involved, and then they can say yes or no, like, that's kind of my preferred method. But sometimes using your words is kind of the better way. But yeah. Another thing is, like, I have discovered, at least in the chapters that I have played in, that cultures, like, people from certain cultures, so, like, if you, like, let's use, like, we have the Valkyrim and the Arakans and the Kursagi and, like, all those people, right? Like, it's kind of like that birds of a feather flock together kind of thing. And that's a very easy way to, like, kind of tell, like, who you're looking at, right? Like, oh, these three people are all over here, and they're talking about how nobles are bad. They must be Kursagi. Like, those kinds of things where, like, you're able to kind of infer based on what you know about the world that your character is from, like, where everyone else is from. And that, to me, has been super helpful because when I choose to play a character from a culture, it's because I love that culture, and I think it's a really cool, like, thing to be connected to. And another thing that kind of helps me get into game is knowing that I am connected, my character is connected with people who have the same values as her, because we are from the same place. And so, like, that kind of has helped me kind of build connections around my characters that are like, we share similar values because we are from the same place and we believe the same things about the world as a result of our upbringing. That, like, kind of makes getting into roleplay a little bit easier, because you're like, oh, that person's wearing a tartan too, so they're from, tartans are a Dromar thing. That's another Dromari. I can connect with that person because we have that in common. Doesn't matter, like, what clan we're from, but, like, we are from the same place, and therefore we were raised the same way. And we can disagree about things, but still have that, like, foundational thing in common. That helps me as well. So, I don't know. Your mileage may vary. Is also, may as well put that on a sticker for these fireside chats. But just, like, stuff like that. Like, I know, Jesse, you've specifically been doing a lot of looking into the world, and Talora specifically, and you've been doing kind of a good job of, like, I created a character that is very intentionally all of these things that are connected to the place that they are from, and, like, it's a lot easier to kind of get into the game when you have those things in common, like, when you're able to just, like, be like, that's one of my people! Snipe! But yeah. Alright, we've got approximately 5 more minutes. I'm gonna fix my headset real quick. Yeah. Let's see. I don't know, I will say LARP kind of has a lot of, obviously, by its very nature, being a role-playing game, it has a lot of opportunity for you and your characters to make decisions, like, make bold moves, as, I've heard it referred to, like, where you're able to, like, your choices influence the world around you for worse or, for better or for worse. And those, taking those, making those big swings, doing those, big hits, what's the saying? Though they are little, they are, but, they are fierce kind of thing, where it's like, I'm a low level guy, I'm just a little guy, but I'm gonna swing for the fences with this one and just kind of see what happens. My first ever Refuge character, took a risk, got some unfettered magic, and linked herself to a dragon, and then, had to do some crazy shit to save the world. But, the choices that she made very early on, this is the kind of person I want to be. I want to be a person who helps people. I want to be a healer. I want to, be all of the things that, the people who raised me told me I couldn't be because it was dangerous, because, necromancy was attached to it. Knowing what your motivations are for your character, and carrying those with you, in your mind and in your heart while you're playing them, is such an easy way for you to kind of insert yourself into a conversation, where someone's saying something that might run counter to what your character believes. How do you react? What do you do? Who is this person in the moment when their beliefs are tested? Who is this person in the moment when they have to make a decision, make an impossible decision, right? Who are they? And when you figure that out, and how you figure that out, is playing the game, right? That's what makes the game what it is. So, it can be intimidating, it can be scary when you're I don't know any of these people, and you're asking me to have conversations with them about things that I don't understand in game. But do it scared might also be a good kind of way to put it, perhaps. Just be willing to try. And again, people are willing to try right alongside you. There's not a person in this community who's not going to look at a new player who's just trying to, squeak out a name for themselves in the adventuring community and be I will let them suffer. That's just not what I've experienced in the culture of this game. People are more than willing to kind of take you under their wings and help your character get where they want to go. And that's that's just a fun part of it, because you never know where you're going to end up. And I think that's pretty neat. But yeah. Alright. Anyone else have any questions, comments, jokes, fun things? I don't know. Because we're about to hit 8:30, and we typically try to cap these at an hour and a half. But yeah. Alright. Well, if the answer to that question is no, thank you all for coming. We're just really, really excited that you're here. Really grateful. And looking forward to all of the things that this new season of adventuring brings us to. We're going to have, there have already been a few games. We have a couple games this weekend. Salt Lake City has their day game. I believe San Francisco has a weekender. But yeah, once more into the realms, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Good night, everybody. Thanks for coming.